and we'll get started. I know everyone's time is very valuable, so we want to make sure that we have time to hear all the comments this afternoon before everyone has to take off for their evening. My name is Kay Molnar. My company is Sella Molnar & Associates. We are helping to facilitate the meeting. We're the ones that you RSVP'd to and got the list together and everything. So I'm just going to take care of a few housekeeping items. We have restrooms over here on the back. Both the men and women is in the same area. We have refreshments up here. There's water, orange juice. There's sodas in the cooler and coffee. Once the coffee runs out, it's out, because I don't drink coffee and I don't know how to make it. So we're gonna try to move very quickly through this so everybody gets some time to give their input. However, in your packets, we have a little bit of an agenda of what's going to happen today, the topics and the questions that we're asking. We've got a map, which is the same map that's up here. And then we've got 2 comment sheets. One comment sheet lists the questions out. If you'd like to comment on particular items and give them back to us, that's fine. If you just have general comments that don't fit because you want to tell us everything, that's fine too. We'll have a comment box in the back where you can slip your comments in this afternoon. We hope that you'll leave them with us this afternoon, but if for some reason you can't, you can email me at the same email address as you RSVP'd at. With that, I'm going to ask Dr. Anderson. He's going to do an invocation, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance afterwards.
Since we're going to have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, maybe we all stand together. It's again that we are assembled and we come together as community persons who are concerned about our community. We just pray now that this meeting will be a meeting that will have our hearts and minds together for the betterment of mankind. We pray that you would bless every entity here. We pray that you would bless every heart, every mind, and every spirit. Bring us together, for it's in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now I'd like to turn the program over to Saeed Kazemi, City Manager for City of Fort Myers.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to, on behalf of the mayor and the city council, to thank you for taking time to be here. This means a lot personally to me. I wrote the invitations and nobody said no. This is wonderful. I really appreciate. So I'm not going to talk too much because I was told not to. So this is your meeting and this is going to be all your meeting. So there is enough people here, and I really, really, bottom of my heart, thank you so much taking time in your busy day to come here. And this shows how much you care about the city. This shows that whatever city wants to do, it's going to be moved forward with your directions. We do not want to do this in the vacuum. We want your help. This is your city, your future. Your kids or my kids are going to grow up here. So let's do it together. Hopefully, we'll come up with something that it will be a model for this area, maybe for state of Florida. Let's do it that way. That's why we have our project manager, Mr. Green, Trent Green, from South Florida, University of South Florida. And that's why we went to the academic. We said, let's do it right. And that's why we are here. No defense on any consultant in the room. But this is what we want to do. We want them to be involved. We want you to be involved. This is a good project. Actually, at the end of the day, it will double our downtown size if we do it right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm assuming everybody can hear. My name is Trent Green. I'm an architect and urban designer, and I'm a professor of architecture and urban design at the University of South Florida in Tampa. I'm part of a group at the School of Architecture and Community Design that we work with communities around, well, for the most part, we've been working with communities such as Fort Myers, around the Tampa Bay area. We've done work down in this area, down in Naples a while back, and even over on the Space Coast, on the east coast of Florida. Specifically in the area of urban and community design. So as the city manager said, we've been asked to help address a number of issues related to development in the downtown area, and also looking at the Midtown area, as he mentioned, as an extension of downtown itself. More specifically, we've been tasked with charged rather with three tasks. That is to look at density issues related to downtown, as well as Gardner's Park, and also infill development, and trying to identify appropriate building types, massing, form, those types of issues. And then when we move on to the next phase of this effort, we'll be focusing most of our time, let's say, on Midtown. There we'll be developing a more comprehensive and more integrated, you can call it a master plan or a vision plan, but the intent is to try to understand how better Midtown can grow as an integrated part of the overall downtown itself. Okay. A couple of things. Kay was. You're going to remind me of what now?
Do you have cell phone in your pocket?
Yes.
Can we take it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
I think
I'm
we're
sorry.
getting some feedback.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so. Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we asked you all to come today to help with this process now. And keep in mind, this is very early on in the process for us. We're just getting started. But the way we work is we want to hear from the community first before we do anything. We have not come with any preconceived ideas. Nothing's been done yet. This is literally, aside from our research and background information analysis, let's say, this is really the sort of as some people might call it, sort of a kickoff meeting. Okay. Now we do have a number of items, as you can see in your briefing packet, that we want to try to cover today. I think we've got just under 2 hours, and we'd like to hear from as many people as possible. So we're going to ask you questions surrounding these topics, but please keep your remarks very, very short, because we'd like to hear from as many people as possible. If you don't get to make a comment, a verbal comment, and Kay will be coming around with the microphone, let's say, if you don't get to make a verbal comment, please, by all means, put your comments in writing, because we will be compiling all of those notes just after this meeting. Okay. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and well, before we dive right in, one other thing. I want to make sure also everybody understands that this is we're not here to try to start this process anew. Okay, we're literally picking up on the work that's already been done by Roberts Engineering, Laura DeJohn, and of course the plan that was done by John Romine at Insight. We're going to be carrying some of those ideas forward, but we're not. This is not meant to be a duplicative effort by any stretch. Okay. Okay. So as you see on your list, the first item that we want to talk about are regulatory limitations, shortcomings, or needed revisions, let's say, to a lot of development-related documents that hopefully will help the city achieve its identified objectives for downtown and the Midtown area. So the first question to you then is, then what processes are perceived or actually to slow down this process? So Where's the mic? Okay, Kay has the mic, so anybody want to comment on that topic right away? Regulatory limitations, shortcomings, or needed revisions. And we're talking about the comprehensive plan, we're talking about the downtown plan, land development regulations. Yes.
My name's Bill Mudgett, Parker Mudgett Smith Architects. I've been working in downtown for almost 50 years now, and I was on the Fort Myers Planning Board for 18 years. I'm not familiar in depth with what's gone on before, and I'm sure many of us around the table aren't either. If we're building on previous work, I think if we want to respond effectively, we should be brought up to speed on the previous work, just as a starting point. But the fundamental regulatory process that I think needs to happen to make this all work is to look at the overall plan. Just like, you know, the downtown plan that Duane put together and the city has followed through with, more or less, up to this point, is a structure that seemed to work. And I think that the work that we do from this point forward needs to look at that area in a broad scope manner rather than just density, where does it go here, there. I think there's an overall look at Midtown and Gardner's Park in its relationship to downtown that has to be taken.
Okay. Thank you.
When you hear that bell go off, that's not somebody's cell phone. We actually are trying to keep things on a timer, so we ask that we just keep them brief. Anybody else?
Okay. Yes.
Hi, Jennifer Sapin with Baracco & Associates. I'm a land planner and have recently done a due diligence for an area in the downtown, in the very core center of downtown. And I think the vision for that plan is exactly what we want. Density, walkability, nice architectural features. But the client wouldn't be able to develop under the current comprehensive plan. There just isn't enough density. So at least in the urban core of downtown, the comprehensive plan needs to be much higher density allowed in that area.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Kevin Williams. I'm the architect as well downtown. I was also trained in urban planning and design. But I also sit on the Historic Preservation Commission for the city. And while I agree there's a certain economics that's necessary for increased density, we also cannot forget the character and fabric of our historic downtown. Mm-hmm. And while I personally am not opposed to increased densities and heights, it needs to be done in a way that has a transition to the historical fabric and character.
Right.
Otherwise, I think we're going to cut our nose off to spite our face. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Before we move on to the next question, I was asked to introduce Steve Belden, who is a Community Development Director. Steve?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. Steve Belden, Community Development Director, new to the city, been here since June. Happy to be here. I just wanted to kind of put this into a broader context of kind of what we're all doing here. You know, there was some work that was done previously, and I wasn't here before, so I wasn't a part of that. But, you know, we're looking at, you see the map up here, and we're looking at the downtown, we're looking at Midtown, which generally this area here, and we're looking at Gardner's Park. And we're looking at all these areas together as a unified and integrated plan moving forward. They're all distinctive in nature, but they all have some commonalities geographically and otherwise. So the idea is to come together and, you know, look at these issues that you have before you today and kind of see how all of these issues relate to these various issues, these various locations that we're trying to address moving forward. So as Trent said, this is the beginning of the of picking back up the process that had started some time ago and building upon that. But we're trying to, take an overall kind of view of the entire area here and an integrated approach to these three distinctive areas. So that's kind of the objective, and again, this is kind of the first meeting for that. This is the first meeting, and there's going to be several meetings moving forward, so this is our chance to get some information from you. Then Trent will go back and work on that, and we'll build upon that, and we'll have several more meetings coming up. But just to kind of put this in context of what we're doing is, these three areas, kind of focusing on them and charting a course forward for those areas. So hopefully that helps a little bit to explain.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I was somewhat remiss in not acknowledging Steve, as well as Lee Screbis, who's CRA director. We'll be working, there's Lee in the back, we'll be working very closely with both Steve and Lee primarily, but we'll be working with every city department throughout this process. Now, we planned this out as a sort of a 9-month process. Probably about 8 months now. We're a little bit late getting started. But the intent is to have probably a workshop just about every, I'm trying to think, at least 4 or 5 workshops along the way or throughout this process. So we'll be asking you to come back, but at those workshop sessions, we're going to actually put you to work, okay? So, because we want you to feel like you're an integral part of this process, as as the city manager mentioned. So, the follow-up meetings or sessions with you, please come a lot more casual, because, like I say, these will be sessions where we'll be rolling up our sleeves and really trying to get down to work to accomplish the objectives of this effort. Okay. Okay, if there are no more comments on this first topic, then let's move to the next one. As was mentioned, downtown has a very well-established historic character, but obviously there are still some infill opportunities available, and this topic really addresses the collective urban form. That is, how does new infill development sort of relate to this? To the historic character of downtown and Gardner's Park. So the question for this topic deals with how can this new development enhance the historical and the community strengths of the greater downtown area.
Got any takers? All right.
Yes.
My name is Rob Johnson. I'm the owner of the Butterfly Estates, as well as the Vice President of Gardner's Park Community Association. To date, we've had over 45 community meetings since 2009, so I come here with a lot of voices and concerns. Some of those concerns are we starting from scratch? Since we've had so many meetings and we all are very interested in growth, we've been stifled over there, and mainly it's because of the density issue. A lot of concerns from our community is height of buildings, for instance. A lot of people don't want a large building in their backyard. So I think my question to you is, I feel like we've been stifled a little bit. Are we starting from scratch? Our Insight plan was adopted by the City Council, as probably you are aware of.
Yes.
And it did cost us a lot of money, so
right.
We want to know where we are.
No, we are not starting from scratch in that regard. We have the Gardner's Park plan. We're reviewing that right along with a lot of other documents as well. And we've been made very well aware of the issue in Gardner's Park relative to the density, height, and appropriate building types, let's say, that could be built there in the future.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Heather Fitzenhagen, representing the district in the downtown area. My question is, as we are going to be contemplating increased density in order to make the redevelopment viable, are we also contemplating additional green space?
Yes, very much so. One of the reasons we gave this project the title of an integrated downtown redevelopment strategy is we're looking at we're looking at this in a more comprehensive manner. Obviously, for the city to move forward with quality conditions in the downtown area, Gardner's Park, let's say, we're going to be looking at open spaces, the public realm, how all those types of conditions relate to development or future development, let's say. So it'll be an integral part of what we're doing from the very outset. Okay.
Anyone else before we move on?
Okay. All right. The next topic. You guys are making this too easy. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. But please share your thoughts and your comments, because, like I said, we know you guys have been working at this for an awful long time, and you know a lot more about this than we do. But we really want to hear from you and understand what your concerns, your ideas are, and because that's really going to both inspire us and help guide us in our work. Okay. The next topic deals with Midtown and the future of and its role rather in the future of downtown. As has been alluded to, the thinking on this part of the city is that Midtown will be an extension of the downtown, historic downtown core, let's say. But what role can Midtown play as an expanded development area for downtown, and also serve as a transition between Cleveland Avenue corridor and the Dunbar community on the east? Yes.
I have more of a question about that. Is your mandate or your study, what's the breadth of it? Because one of the things, if you're going to connect and create that connection between downtown and midtown, you know, the biggest problem, you know, from a planning sense to me is the road infrastructure that literally cuts it right in half. And is your mandate going to be able to go beyond, you know, to state, you know, dealing with state DOT? How do you connect, you know, both vehicular and pedestrian standpoint to make that a more viable solution?
Yes. Did everybody hear the question? We will be looking. We do have a. If I can sort of show this, I'm not sure if everybody can see it, but this is the area of Midtown that we've been that's been shown on the planning documents that have been given us. Now, any type of urban or community design project doesn't go right up to the line or to the boundary and stop, because as was mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned the need for appropriate transitions from one area to the next. And we know we've got beyond Fowler, of course, we've got Evans and MLK, of course, at the north, 41 of Cleveland on the west, and Edison to the south. But we'll go beyond that a block or two, north, east, south, and west, to try to understand what's the best type of transition from envisioned development or existing development with these adjacent neighborhoods, let's say. We recognize the fact that you've got state roads around three portions of the Midtown area. Now, at some point in the process, if we have to, we will draw into this effort some of our transportation planning professionals from our Center for Urban Transportation Research at USF, Qatar. Okay, so we do have the ability to address those types of issues with district. Which DOT district is this? District 1. Okay, yes, we're in District 7. I'm sorry, but yes, we do have the ability to address those types of issues as well. Okay. In many ways, we've been talking about this. My project team, we've been talking about this already. the fact that the Midtown area is much like University of South Florida, because it's virtually surrounded on 3 sides by major state roads, and we've been struggling with the issue of how to breach those areas. So we'll be addressing that as well, all around the edges of Midtown also. Yes.
We have a gentleman over here.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I'm Lee Ford. I'm with the Collaboration Board in Dunbar Community. I'm kind of like Mr. Mudgett. I can't really comment on anything because I really don't know what I'll be commenting on. But I will state for the record that I'm very concerned about the transition going east. I want to know what's happening and when it's happening and what is being proposed in order for me to comment on it. I mean, that's just the one thing I can say right now.
Ann Pierce. Mr. Green, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. I think waiting until later in this process to maybe involve Cutter, I just don't think that's such a good idea. One of the most important things I think that we get right is integrating transportation in all modes into land use, every aspect of land use planning from the very, very beginning. We as a society are on the verge of the most massive change in transportation that has happened since we transitioned from horse and buggy. We need to have that thinking integrated from the very, very beginning and in everything we do. We should have a team of representatives from Fort Myers, we should have had for years, with, say, a council member as part of that team, to be working with FDOT and Lee County all along on transitioning First and Second Street to two-way, transitioning the actual physical and very potent psychological barriers to moving eastward, which are Evans and Fowler. Those roads need to go back to two-way. FDOT has indicated for a number of years that they're willing to do that. They've already embarked on design several years ago. We had the most amazing division director that you could have possibly in the whole nation here, and we needed to have pushed a little more aggressively while he was here. Our Division I secretary who's replaced him has indicated to me, in any case, many, many times that he is willing to work with the city of Fort Myers to get the transportation right. This planning should be TOD oriented. We need to base it on quarter-mile and half-mile walk and bike sheds.
Right.
But we're missing the T. There is no T here, and there's no T planning.
We understand that. Those are some very good points that Ms. Pierce brings up, and we approach urban and community design projects in that manner. We always look for those opportunities to address simultaneously land use and transportation at the same time, or as an integral part of the effort. Where we see opportunities to identify TOD conditions, let's say, we will factor that in. We'll fold that into the process as well. Let me mention something else, because Mr. Ford sort of alluded to it. Keep in mind now, we haven't proposed anything yet. Okay, so this is really just to hear from you, okay, about the kinds of issues that we're raising on the information packet that you have. But we haven't done any work yet. We're gonna come back. I was going to mention this at the end of the session, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. We're going to take all this input and fold it into our process to really get started. We will be back in about 5 or 6 weeks, and we'll be ready to have a workshop with you. We'll be ready to sit down with you, and not with tablecloths, but we'll have graphics, we'll have maps, we'll have a lot of things. I'll tell you a little bit about our process for addressing the density issues in downtown and Gardner's Park. What we're going to do is actually we're going to generate several digital models of some sample locations, let's say, different size parcels. And what we're going to do is show you a range of densities that could happen, okay, on those parcels. Now, it's not our intent to say this one or that one is better. We're going to present them to you, and we're going to let you decide, okay? But we want to make sure that you understand what the implications are in terms of, because it was brought up earlier, height and density, but we recognize that some people can't separate the two, but for us, you know, they're two different issues. But we're going to look at different size parcels, different locations, and like I say, generate some digital models to help show you what certain densities would look like in those specific areas. Okay? Yes, I think you have the mic.
Hi, Ashley Phillips, AIM Engineering. Just wanted to talk about, we are located in Midtown, and some of the things that we have noticed since we've been located there since March, MLK is not only a physical barrier for Midtown, but it's a mental barrier. Mm-hmm. Very, very mental. People don't want to cross MLK because it's a little scary. Yep. It's big. Yep. It feels like a barrier, even if, you know, it's not. It feels that way. So I think the transition between downtown and midtown is really going to center on MLK and how you're going to transition people right there on that barrier, because our staff, even though we could potentially walk downtown, they don't do it. Right. Because it just feels difficult. Yeah. Further, on Fowler, because we're located on Fowler also, walkability on Fowler is impossible. There's no sidewalks. You couldn't. I mean, you wouldn't want to. So also, we're located on Evans, too. So we see people crossing Evans on foot. Now, they're crossing the railroad tracks, and they're crossing Evans to come into Midtown. Right. That's scary, too. Right. So the roads are definitely an issue with walkability, lack of sidewalks, and, you know, the feeling of a barrier.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just really wanted to follow up on what she said, because it's really important. Fowler Street is a mental block for Gardner's Park. People are very reluctant to cross from the inner core of the River District over to Gardner's Park. The traffic that flies down the bridge just is speeding at outrageous speeds sometimes. They will fly through the lights, and, you know, God forbid anybody gets hit by a vehicle. But that is stifling our business over there, because people are like, we don't want to cross that. Sure. You know. Sure. So okay. Is there any thought to maybe an overpass or something that could be, you know, easily you could walk across like some other cities have? And also, my thought process is, why not adopt like, you know, bicycles that can be rented and like they do in Minneapolis and other places around the country. Sure. That allow people just to move around easier. Sure.
Right. That's a good point. You bring up mobility. Okay. We look at, we use that term as a sort of an umbrella term, and it really includes all types of mobility: walking, biking, driving in cars, riding on the bus, you know, really just how people get around, okay? And we understand that here in Florida, the only way people can get from one place to the next, for the most part, is by driving, okay? We also recognize the fact that most of our roadway infrastructure was designed for just that purpose, okay? So these are challenges. Those are some good ideas that we'll be folding into the workshop process when we get to the point where we're actually trying to identify, well, what types of options are feasible relative to transportation and other types of issues along those lines. So yes, thank you. Yes.
are you aware that FDOT has been drawing, they have a design team working on returning Evans and Fowler to two-way, slowing the traffic, putting bike pedestrian facilities, and accommodating what you just spoke about, basically removing that barrier that has divided the city. And they've been working on it for a couple years.
Right. Now, I'm not aware of the effort to change the traffic, but just recently, DOT did release their complete streets guidelines.
Right.
That we're going to be using those as well in addressing these roadways, these state roadways around the
okay, good.
around the target
We're going to
area.
be doing a big regional workshop on those guidelines here right after the first of the year. But you need to be acquainted with these plans, and I'll help you with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
At somewhat of risk of, again, talking about higher density. But one of the reasons to keep in mind...
That's the next topic.
That, well, but
okay,
it's tied to transportation.
Okay.
One of the reasons that MLK and the bridges are so difficult at rush hour is because everyone drives in the morning and leaves in the evening. If more people were able to live where their job is downtown, then some of the traffic problems go away.
That's a very good point. That was brought up in our very first meeting we had with the city manager about where he was identifying livability issues in the downtown area, as well as the need for more housing of, let's say, different price points, including affordable or attainable housing. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at as well.
I'm Ken Weiner, and I own a property in the Midtown District. And so the issue I'm really dealing with is I have no idea what our vision is for this area and who we're trying to attract. And that will have a tremendous effect on what these buildings should look like, what type of intensity, because there are different types of professionals who have different desires of what type of structures they really want to work in.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody here has any idea of what that vision is going to look like.
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to sit down and hammer out together.
And so just if I could add a couple points to that, we are going to be involving FDOT, obviously. This is very important that they're part of this process, so I don't want anybody to think that we're going to be ignoring FDOT or any other appropriate agency. So they will all be involved in this process. The second thing, in talking to Trent about this, everything is on the table. Every idea outside the box, we want to hear everything. Everybody's thoughts on what their vision is, what they kind of envision the future being here, and take everybody's idea and hopefully at the end of this process come to a consensus on a way forward. I don't think there's necessarily any right way, wrong way, what's best for the community, and we all kind of move forward together, but we want to hear all ideas. And, we brainstorm a little bit, and obviously MLK is a huge barrier. We understand that. That's got to be addressed. How we do that, let's talk about it. We'll come up with some ways to address that. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. That's a problem. So all of these, we want to hear all your ideas and generate discussion. I know this is a little bit difficult right now to, you're kind of being faced with this for the first time, and I'm sure after you leave this, you'll probably have more ideas. And hopefully at the next workshop, we'll have more discussion and more of a real exchange of ideas. But this is to kind of get your thoughts going and generating ideas and maybe coming back, like I said, with whatever you come up with, it's all on the table for us to discuss. So that's the way we're approaching this.
Okay. Any other comments on that topic? Yes.
Thank you. Rick Miller with National Development. You just touched on housing for a minute, and I think the key to getting housing, putting housing in Midtown is what previous speakers mentioned about connecting Midtown with downtown, whether it be by the road system, but sidewalks and bike paths and parks. I mean, if you look at some of the urban areas in the bigger cities, I mean, that's the whole emphasis on putting people where they work, they can walk, they feel comfortable. Like you were mentioning, you don't feel comfortable walking in a lot of these areas. Before you can create effective housing, you have to connect Midtown with downtown.
Right.
So people are not walking by abandoned buildings and the like, you know, where they do feel uncomfortable and there are no sidewalks. People have to be able to ride a bike. That was, you know, somebody suggested the rent-a-bike that they have in a lot of the cities. Absolutely. We should be able to, you know, if you have housing in Midtown, they should be able to either walk or ride a bike downtown to a restaurant or a store very comfortably. And I think that we need to integrate that up front in this process.
Thank you, Rick. That's a very good point. Can you turn this off for me again? I'm sorry. That's okay. I'll make gestures here. Oh, excuse me. Okay. This map sort of shows. Here's the Midtown area. This is of course, you know, one of our main focus areas. But as I was alluding to earlier, we're going to be looking at Midtown as a sort of a new heart for the downtown area in general. So making connections from the west, from the south, from the east, and of course from downtown and Gardner's Park. That's going to be that's going to be right at the forefront of our initial concept, our planning concept when we get started, okay? Because we recognize that, again, it has to be an integrated approach. Okay, thank you. It is. Okay. Okay, the next topic, and I'm pretty sure this is the one that a lot of people want to comment on. Existing and future building scale, height, density, and intensity, okay? What is the, you know, our question to you is, what are the best building heights and densities and intensities for the Midtown that will meet the city's future growth needs, its financial obligations, while at the same time maintaining an appropriate scale with adjacent communities? Yes.
The planning that's gone on for downtown Fort Myers in the last 15 years seems to have worked downtown. Downtown's working pretty well. One of the specific adjuncts of that was looking south from downtown to expand the character of downtown into Midtown. And one of the benefits of that was in downtown, we were trying to limit the height of the buildings to keep the character of downtown Fort Myers. Certainly Gardner's Park has a character that needs to be maintained. That's a priority. South of MLK, however, especially the north Midtown section, it's been pretty well destroyed over the years in one way or another as far as a integrated visual neighborhood. I don't think, you know, density and height are components of the planning process. Right. They're not the focus. Right. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes density gets the highest priority of people's thinking, but that's only one component. The community south of MLK and integrating it into the community north of MLK, from a density standpoint and a height standpoint, that's what Midtown has been looked at as a place to increase density to help focus on downtown, have people in the periphery living in higher density situations and taller buildings where they don't affect the character of downtown. I think that we just have to make sure that density and height aren't what we focus on completely.
Thank you. That's a very good point. And we certainly understand that is just one component of an overall vision for this area. And again, we'll be doing the same thing in the Midtown area. We'll be generating massing model scenarios for everybody to sort of take a look at and sort of see what works best in terms of infill, that is the size of building, the density rather, height and intensity. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. In your experience, is there a specific community or communities that you could direct us to take a look at between now and the next meeting that you think might be good examples of something that would be successful here in our area?
Yes, I can point to a couple of. Well, we look sort of around the country for ideas and inspiration. But something maybe closer here to Fort Myers, just on the other side of the state, of course, is City Place, which I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with. City Place, by all means, seems to be a pretty good project. But the idea is for the Midtown area, is to create a true place. And some of you, I'm pretty sure, have heard of this term, placemaking. That's going to be one of our major priorities, okay? And just like they tried it at City Place over in West Palm Beach, rather, we're going to be looking at this issue of placemaking here in Fort Myers, here in the Midtown area, okay? Not just looking at this from a purely land use, in a purely land use manner, but looking at it from the standpoint that this could be a holistic community, and create a vibrant sense of place where walking, biking, and commercial activity are all going hand in hand, let's say.
I just wanted to add a comment because you said City Place, which I'm familiar with over on the other coast. One of the concerns I would have is how we have a long-range economic plan to be able to continue to have the development itself to be thriving, because right now City Place is having some problems. They are experiencing some vacancies and so forth, and so it concerns me that we might build something such as that, which was very well conceived, but unless we have the backup economic plan to maintain it, we will end up with open buildings and no people renting them.
Exactly. That's a good point. A lot of these places, they do go through these phases of well, I mean, if you were around when City Place was first open, of course, you couldn't even get in there. You couldn't get a parking space. There was so many people. But once the allure sort of wears off, then yes, you do wind up with some businesses shuttering or going out of business because there's a lack of foot traffic or patronage or whatever. From a usage point of view, we're going to look at a number of strategies that will attempt to identify what are the best types of uses to try and plan a program or vision in this area. We're going to look for uses that mixed uses rather, uses that can achieve a certain degree of synergy between them, okay? But I think the problems that you're alluding to in City Place may have to do with the tenant mix, okay? And we fully suspect over time, of course, you know, that mix does change quite a bit. So, yes. Yes.
Yes, my name's Gene Gibson. Well, when you talk about height and density, it all really depends on what area you're talking about. Urban general, urban center, urban core. Urban core is probably going to be the most controversial because that's where you can get some of the highest buildings. And I do think there needs to be some firm height limit set. And another issue I wanted to mention is while we're talking about Midtown, which is probably going to get most of the focus, the River District is still very important and key, especially the riverfront area in the River District. And most all the vacant lots along the riverfront already have, in fact, some where there are even buildings there now, they're PUDs and development agreements that are already in place for some very tall condo towers. And that's fine. That's probably the right place to put some of these tall towers. But other than that, let's have the 18-story limit may be right. But so this wouldn't interfere with any property rights, and this is the right place for it. The other issue that was touched on earlier is trying to maintain some green spaces and how to activate the riverfront without overbuilding and overdeveloping and Disneyfying the River District. And in that regard, there was a study done, the Florida Waterfronts Partnership Program, that for Fort Myers that had good ideas about activating the riverfront. Activating the riverfront should be for public use, public access to the water. We don't need to have more restaurants along the riverfront. We already got a lot of restaurants in town.
Okay. Okay. Good points.
Just want to mention, in addition to State Representative Fitzenhagen being here today, we also have Councilman Mike Flanders, who's hiding in the back row.
Hi, Barbara Bengochea Perez with One and Allure. We're one of the developments that is coming on the waterfront. I've been fortunate to be here for about 13 years, and I was fortunate enough to be part of 2 of the high-rises coming up in City Place. So I did look at City Place a long time ago, and for all of you here, and thank you for mentioning Representative Fitzhagen, the interesting component that we have here that the City Place does not have is that we have what you see right across. We have waterfront. And another thing is we have history. They lack that a little bit. So I think with those 2 components that we will have here, with what we're doing with Midtown, Gardner's Park, and the River District, is going to make a huge difference for economic planning. Now, another thing I wanted to ask you, Mr. Green, is will Mr. Andres Duani be involved, or at least been consulted, regarding all these expansions?
We were not asked to contact them. I know Andres from a long time ago. If appropriate, we will. Of course, I'm pretty sure he will be more than happy to comment on what it is we're doing. So at some point, we probably will at least reach out and let both he and Liz know that we're following up on an effort they did years ago. Right. 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 Okay.
Probably, I apologize. Andres Duani is the urban planner, world-renowned. If you want to look at his website, it's dpz.com. He actually has done amazing urban planning all around the world. He actually was in Australia now doing something amazing. But he's actually the one that did the whole smart code for the River District. So that's what my question was all about.
Anyone else?
Yes.
My name's Sawyer Smith, and to comment on the riverfront discussion that was had, first, I don't know of any restaurants that we actually have on the riverfront in Fort Myers. It'd be nice if we had one. But a friend of mine, Jenna, pointed out on the topic of utilizing the river that as early as 1926, when the city of Fort Myers hired a guy named Herbert Swan to do the Fort Myers plan, he wrote in his plan, the Caloosahatchee River is, second to its tropical climate, Fort Myers' greatest natural asset, yet the city has, up until present, practically turned its back upon the river as if it were ashamed of it. And as we approach 100 years to this comment, perhaps your team can remove the way the city looks at the river and the shame that we apparently have for it. Thank you.
Good comment. I'm chuckling because we have the very same issue in Tampa, okay, and have had for quite some time. That is, we've turned our back on the waterfront. Yes. Any other comments on height? Someone else? Okay. Height, density, scale, building scale, and intensity.
Well, I wanted to hit the next bullet to that, and it has to do with land use as it relates to height, density, because all of that will circle back to, I think, the whole idea of transportation and what, you know, and the impacts on the different modes of transportation. If it's a heavily residential, it has one impact. If it's heavily commercial, it certainly is going to have another. So is land use as well going to be part of that open dialogue?
Oh, yes, very much so, definitely. Okay. Another comment?
My name is Lydia Black, and I'm with the Lee County Alliance for the Arts, but I'm a business owner in Midtown. Actually, we purchased on MLK and Jackson. And through that process, I learned quite a bit that small business isn't typically welcomed or encouraged downtown, which we were really discouraged through the permitting projects, through trying to enhance the neighborhood. We did a significant amount of investment in facade, looking at green spaces, how to protect the park next to us. And as an individual going through that process who was willing to invest, one of the conversations we had with other business owners and with city members were, who are you trying to attract downtown? Who are we trying? Are we trying to attract millennials? Are we trying to attract older folks moving in? Is it walkability and transportation and these higher units? But who do you want to come here? Because my husband and I moved here in our early 30s and live, work, and play in city limits so that we can bike and walk. We opened our business. We employ 14 people. We care about the arts and culture. We care about placemaking projects, projects that activate space, that care about water quality. And I think we've lost who we're marketing our place to. We haven't identified our identity in Fort Myers. And I think that's given us a lack of vision and strategic planning for what the future beholds, not just when it comes to economic development and community building, but transportation and education and affordable housing and multi-use. And I just want to give that as an example of folks who are committed to the city have had a hard time investing in the city.
Excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up, use that word identity, okay? That's one of the things that we try to build on. We always look for the resources that already exist in a community, the things that a community is identified by, okay, and try to build or expand on that or illuminate that as much as best we can in our urban and community design work. But identity, I'd like to hear somebody else comment on that. What do you think the identity of Fort Myers actually is? Yes.
The identity of Fort Myers is a small town that's on a river in a tropical atmosphere. All those things have been mentioned before, but it's an old community as far as Florida goes. It has downtown Fort Myers, which is an incredible asset and an incredible hook for identity. It's got the Dunbar community as an identity. Right on in the nearest portion of the Dunbar community to this project is a project the city is investing a lot of money in and can help provide identity. Across 41, along Edison, that the city is going to be investing money from a transportation standpoint to connect over to McGregor Boulevard is Edison Park. Another hook for identity. All of the small, especially in South Midtown and south of that, between Cleveland and Fowler, are old Fort Myers identities that probably will be sacrificed for density, but that can, if we can limit the high density to areas that affect that less, that area south of Edison can also provide identity to downtown Fort Myers and to Midtown.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Justin Anderson, concerned citizen. I grew up pretty much nearby Midtown, and I used to work in Midtown when I was in high school at the Holiday Inn there. That was back, of course, when we had the Red Sox doing their spring training. And I remember even as a teenager just having that, did a lot for the area, a lot of business. But, of course, they moved away. And then we had the opportunity, actually, to some of you in this room probably know this, to actually have Florida Gulf Coast in town and not way out there. But where is it? Way out there. And so I'm just kind of wondering, after the last 20 plus years, when are we going to get some kind of economic boost in this area? I mean, it's been 20 years. I'm shocked at what I see in my hometown when I drive around and I see an area that used to be thriving and vibrant, and it's shocking. I'm surprised nobody's really talking much about that, although I'm sure there are reasons for that I don't know about.
That's a good point. Justin brought up the issue of university presence, and we recognize that that's a sort of a trend around the country. Most universities, a lot of universities that are, let's say, like USF in Tampa, we're a suburban university away from downtown. Well, with the major new development that's proposed, USF will have a much stronger presence in downtown. So that's one of the things that we're going to look at as part of this planning effort, is having a major institutional use or branch or satellite or some part of a larger entity that's well known in the downtown area, whether it's an educational institution. I know that the hospital is just not too far, okay, but again, having some type of major institutional presence in downtown, okay. Obviously, there are other already institutions, of course, in the small institutions, that is, in the area around downtown now, but we'd be looking to see if it's feasible rather to, and I'm pretty sure the city will be glad to start those discussions with with the university and others if they're willing to have some presence in the downtown area. Yes.
It would be great to get another institution in the Midtown area, mainly because the only institution we have in this part of town is the Justice Complex. And
Right.
a lot of people in town feel like if I'm going downtown, the only reason why I'm going downtown is because I got a ticket, I'm in trouble, I got to see a lawyer, I got to see a bail bondsman, I got to pay a bill.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't really think that's the kind of feeling most people
Right.
have
Right.
when they go to a certain part of town.
That's good. Excellent point.
Justin, very good point. Savannah, Georgia, which is another Andres Duani community, has SCAD, which is an arts design school inside its downtown. But you were asking the identity, going back to identity. Of course, I agree, thousands of people coming in through our doors, and here the people who live in the city may have an idea of what our identity is. And that's like when we have children. We have a 5-year-old, and once it grows up, 18 years old, 20 years old, we think they still have the same identity. They changed. And it's maybe their surrounding, their environment, people who come into their lives. Same thing here. I'll tell you the identity that I see coming in, not from my perspective, but from who wants to live here. We've recently gone to contract on one of our towers, and it's actually people who are, 50-year-olds or now 40-year-olds, but it's doctors are calling this area, they want to call it their primary home. Reason being is they believe that this is an area that they can actually come, walk, entertain. That's what they're seeing. And we're still seeing, we saw a shift that I didn't see 13 years ago. We're seeing the East Coast. So we're seeing New York. You're looking up, they're wanting to come to this area. So it used to always be the Minnesota, Chicago, Boston.
Right.
But now we're seeing the East Coast folks who actually say, yes, we want to buy here because this is where we want to retire, because this is becoming the place. It's kind of like they don't want to go to Naples. So they see like this like a high-end hipster place. And that's what they're focusing on. They're seeing it. And that's why these other artists and things are coming into the area that we may not be aware of. So I just wanted to share that.
That's a good point about who you're trying to who would you like to move into this community? As many of you probably well know, most cities will always say, well, we need to make sure that we plan to keep the people that we have here now, that is, enhance the quality of life for existing residents, and hopefully that will attract others as well. But a lot of cities are literally clamoring to bring in millennials or keep them, okay? I work with them every day. I hear all of the comments about what they plan to do after they graduate, where they want to go. Many of them are saying, I'm going where the job opportunities are, or I'm going to a cool place to live, okay? One of the things that we've been studying is this is a report that came out. I don't know if we have any brokers in the room, but a report that came out by Cushman and Wakefield earlier in the year, and it was called Cool Streets, okay? And what they did was they went around the country and looked at a lot of communities that literally had cool streets to understand, well, what made them cool. These are vibrant sort of locations. These are places, let's say, but somehow these are places that are different than, well, let's say your traditional downtown. I think you use the term hipster locations, but they are attractions for young people. Okay, so that's going to be one of the things that we're going to look at also is throughout this process, what types of measures, what types of strategies do we fold into this planning process that will continue to make Fort Myers a quality place to live for existing residents, but will also help bring or keep a lot of young people here.
You could start by convincing the city to allow food trucks in downtown.
Okay.
Downtown on the planet.
Okay. Okay. You mean there's no rally, food truck rally?
No, not allowed. They got full vendor codes.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Yes.
Yeah. You had talked about the identity of Fort Myers, and a lot of people talked about the identity kind of as an early 20th century river town, and that's true. That's the most important thing, and certainly in the historic district that look needs to be maintained. But there's several different architectural styles and look to Fort Myers. There are quite a few attractive mid-century modern buildings, and so you don't want the thing to look. You don't want to overdo it with the historic river town look, especially in other areas. It'll just sort of add kind of a Disneyfication, if there's such a word. And how do you incorporate good architecture is good architecture.
Right.
So how do you incorporate new look and just not look to early 20th century, but some of the other, the Art Deco or mid-century or whatever else there is here?
Yes. Those issues will come up probably a little later in the process, but the visual character, which is what he was alluding to, that's once we get a fairly robust plan for Midtown going, then those types of issues we looked at, because we're just going to keep drilling down more and more, getting more and more specific about this plan and what it entails. Yes?
I'd just like to add that it would be great if we could bring in the artist community too, because like, for example, a community area like Wynwood over in Miami has been very successful, and that could help us make some of the transitions from the different neighborhoods that we're discussing and make it very exciting.
Yes, definitely.
Somebody had a comment over here. Did one of you had a comment? I thought.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate not being the one in the room having to talk about that. So I will say that we've missed our opportunities in the past of integrating the arts into things like shade structures for transportation for buses and community identities by integrating the artists of those communities into the build from the beginning, not raising the costs of projects and not being over and above. But you know, I think that we've seen the city be more open to that. But we would like, for me, I see that the arts are socioeconomic drivers. And that if you look at an example like Florida Repertory Theater, while the city was ripping up its streetscape, if it weren't for the Florida Rep, those restaurants wouldn't have succeeded. They wouldn't have stayed. And so I think we need to do a better job of integrating performance and gathering spaces and green spaces and activation of space in those placemaking projects that include areas for everyone. We have these great open spaces, but no place to sit, no place to put your food down, no place to say, hey, I want to meet you here. And I think we have some really great opportunities and some framework to take advantage of that. We just haven't had the vision to think through how that could happen.
Okay, good. That's an excellent point. Of course, we as architects and designers, we sort of fall within that artist realm or visual artist realm, I should say. So those types of issues are really important to us as well. We're going to, if the city has been reluctant to address those types of issues with the local community in the past, we're going to reopen that can of worms, okay? So, because we feel that's important, okay? It really is. When we start looking at micro scale elements like that you were alluding to, you know, like just infrastructure elements, secondary elements that are in our rights of way, bus shelters, signage, graphics, all those types of things, why shouldn't they help illuminate the public realm? Okay, so that's how we're gonna look at those. When we get to that level of definition in our work, we'll definitely be addressing those types of issues. So, yes.
Hi, Justin again. If we are serious about affordable housing, which was mentioned earlier, help redeveloping the mid-city area, why can't we change the zoning for tiny homes? That will bring in millennials. That'll bring in definitely artists. You know, we're talking about homes that cost less than $30,000 to build. I mean, if we're real serious about this, that would be real easy. We could do that tomorrow.
That's a very good point, Justin. We approach the issue of affordable or attainable or workforce housing, whatever you want to call it, from a multi sort of prong approach. That is, up in Tampa, up in the Bay Area where we're from, it seems like all of the government agencies approach this idea of affordable housing with a sort of a one-size-fits-all mentality, that is, or approach, okay? Just put everybody in a single-family house, okay? But those of you, you know, as you go around the country and you look at the way other cities are addressing this, you're looking at it in so many different ways. Yes, that may be a viable alternative, but there are other strategies that work just as well, and we're going to try and address as many of those as we possibly can in this process, okay? Because the production of attainable housing, that's the problem, okay? Or the inventory. There is no, well, typically there is no inventory. So,
along that same vein, I know in other parts of this country they do mixed income development. I would say, I start saying mixed use, but mixed income development. and that has been very successful in other communities throughout this country. And that's one area in the planning that should be looked at. Workforce and affordable gap, whatever you want to call it, not subsidized housing. I'm not talking about houses. I'm president of Lee County Housing Development Corporation, and we do subsidized housing. That means we go help buy down the house so you can afford to get in it. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
What I'm talking about is people that the city employ could also afford the house and be able to walk to work in the morning.
Sure.
We need to offer, and that has to be early part of the planning. You can't go back and retrofit this type of housing. You have to do it in the planning up front where you have those housing types available. Right now, the average is about $1,000 a month rent, up to $1,200 to $1,500 a month for people to afford a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Take a pencil and a piece of paper when we're paying people $9 and $10 an hour, how that works.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't. But that's the kind of reality people have today.
Right.
The other thing is density. We have to be realistic about that. We have to make it where people a builder or a developer can afford to build the building and then turn around and rent it out or sell it at a price our community can afford it. Everybody can't afford a $1.5 million condo. Not even a $500,000 condo. But they might be able to afford a $200,000, $250,000 condo or $300,000 condo. That's the reality of looking at this. We can build 1,000 units over there or 2,500 units over there, but what good is it if nobody can afford to move in it? The people that can afford that kind of money to live in a place like that don't want to live in Midtown. They want to be on the river or they want to be south.
That's an excellent point. This is of course attainable or workforce housing, let's say, has been an ongoing issue in a lot of cities, and no doubt it will continue to be an issue because every place I've been to around the United States, they're always behind the 8 ball when it comes to affordable housing. There's just not enough production or not enough inventory. One of the things that we've been doing at our Florida Center for Community Design and Research back up at the school is looking to the West Coast of the United States, that is, for ideas and inspiration. They seem to be a lot more active in addressing this issue, and like I said, I mentioned a moment ago, in looking at it in a much more comprehensive manner and looking at a lot of different, how you can bring to bear a lot of different strategies at the same time, okay? Not just try this and then say, well, that didn't work, so let's try something else. Yes, you have to try a lot of things, but what we're finding is that when you have a diverse approach, there's the likelihood for a lot more successes in that regard. So, yes.
Hi, my name is Brianna Molnar. I'm with Florida Southwestern State College. And over there, we've kind of come over the same hump, that the issue that we have here in downtown. Downtown's kind of a come-and-go place. There's no community. Over there, we started with our residence hall, which now holds about 4,000 students, 1,000 of which are our student athletes. Along with student athletes come family from out of town and students with out of town. They play at that new arena that we have built over there, and it kind of built a sense of community for the students. So I think what we're doing downtown, we can kind of collaborate. For those of you who don't know, not only do we have the Suncoast Credit Union Arena, but we are also home to the City of Palms. Baseball for our women's softball and our women's softball and men's baseball. So we're taking our community now over there and we're bringing it to downtown. If we could just really come up with a way to transition that barrier, like we talked about with transportation, to bring the community from FSW to City of Palms to then downtown. If you look at FGCU, they have Gulf Coast Town Center. They've expanded beyond FGCU and created their community with the other portion of the community. That's not the millennials, that's not the students, they feel at home no matter where they go.
Sure.
Where with the students, it's the stadium or classroom. They don't really have Fort Myers locations that broadcast, this is where they go, this is where they live, and it's just, if the college is bringing them to us, if we could just find a way to keep them in and hold them in to entertain them, I think would be just take what we got and run with it. If we're giving this population, we should use it effectively.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's a good point. I didn't use this term, but I'll bring it up now. Multi-generational. Okay? Any community that's going to be a success, okay, it has to be successful for all age groups. Okay? And that's going to be, again, one of the things that's going to guide us in our work. We know some things work for working adults that young people probably don't necessarily like or won't patronize or whatever, and vice versa. Okay, but that doesn't mean we should exclude any particular group or any age group, that is. Okay, so we will be looking at this from a multi-generational point of view. The other thing that I think it came up in one of our meetings with one of our first meetings with the city manager and John Talmadge and some other staff, had to do with livability and what actually keeps people here. Okay, now we know that people have options because everybody has a car. You can get in your car and you can drive south, north, whatever, to get to a desired location or destination. But what can we envision in Fort Myers that's going to keep people here for any number of purposes? First of all, for living, okay. Then for some of the other active lifestyle activities, let's say, that people are typically are driving to other locations to participate in. So that'll be one of the things that we'll be looking at as well. Yes.
Yes, my name's Kirk Beck. One of the things I haven't heard you mention is fiber optic, which I think would be critical in the Midtown area. Because if we're going to look at that area, I think that, it's going to be market driven, and, to arbitrarily set densities and building heights without a market, I think that's going about it backwards. We've got to create the infrastructure. That infrastructure will attract the people that we employ, the people that will live in downtown. And I think a critical part of today's world is the fiber optic ring that needs to be put in downtown. And I don't think that that's a major expense in compared to the other things we're talking about, but I think it's a critical element. And, with regard to eliminating some of the barriers, I mean, Saeed and I have talked a number of times about, MLK and realignments, and we could get into that later, but one of the critical things I believe is, and has been mentioned here, is the Fowler Street alignment, where it becomes a two-way rather than a one-way.
Okay.
That can begin to create a community, whereas if we continue to have a barrier like that, we're setting up walls that will stop people from being able to expand into those areas. I look at the 65 acres that's in Midtown as more or less a foundation to build not only the downtown area in Midtown, but to be expanded out to Colonial Boulevard. This is the first step. And I know I'm on a timer, and I certainly don't want to disrespect the timer, so I believe I've said enough for now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good point, because one of the first questions I asked in our initial meeting with city staff and Lee, Steve were there, John Talmadge, the city manager, said, "How much Class A office space do you have in downtown Fort Myers?" And he said, "None." And I was, well, I probably shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised, because the issue that you're bringing up about fiber optics suggests that to attract certain types of businesses, you have to build smart buildings, okay? And that's one of the things that we're going to look at, is how can this Midtown area accommodate Class A office space, okay, which may get back to
what type of infrastructure is needed to actually support it. So, yes.
Ron Inge. I appreciate you saying that, because one of the comments, or the comment I wanted to make is a lot of the discussion we've had has been about density and residential and livability and green space and bikes and all those things. Those are wonderful things, but they seem to be coming from the residential standpoint. We have to remember that all the things that we do, all of those things that we do that deal with residential creates demands on public services, sewer, water, police, fire, all those types of things. So we have to make sure, and I don't have the answer for it at this point, but we have to make sure that whatever we do in the Midtown provides enough of an increase and stability of a tax base to afford to do all the other things that we want to do. We can't just say, let's put a whole bunch of folks out there and then everything will be wonderful. They demand a lot of public services that we've got to figure out how to pay for, and the only way we can do that is to have a vibrant and expanded tax base to be able to provide the services that we're going to demand. So let's keep that in mind, that it's not all about residential, key component, but other things have to be involved as well.
Okay. Oh, believe me, we've heard that message loud and clear from an economic development point of view.
So Jerry Miller, I'm president of the Gardeners Park Neighborhood Association, and to talk a little about density. Oh, okay. Oh, sure. Well, I think the market trends are showing that people want smaller units. So when you look at Gardeners Park, the lots, which are the old times 50 by 150, you have to take into account that a lot more than one residential unit could fit, because traditionally there might be 2,500, 3,000. 800 square feet, 1,400 square feet, where you need more density. So that's one component. We find in Gardeners Park the last few months, people are moving there, a furniture store, another store in Thompson, they're moving into Gardeners Park. Who's moving in? They're not, millennials, they're not baby boomers, myself. It is a mix. And, my mom, she moved into a building because there's some younger people, and they all get along great. So I don't know who we're attracting. We're attracting everyone who wants to live in a beautiful place. And what is the driver? What are some of the amenities? I'm a big parks guy. I want more and more parks and bike paths. And thank goodness for Ann to push more multimodal transportation. But little things, like I grew up in Miami where you have the water retention ponds are open. They're not fenced off. Can't access them. And we, for years, at least trying to get access for FDOT, maybe we can put some art around the fences. But it seems like there's a wall with FDOT, and maybe you could help us move that forward to either open them up. I understand there's liability issues and things of that nature. But talking about Johnson Engineering really quick, and I'm rambling a little, but they wanted to streamline the PUD process. So regulatory-wise, I think you have to look at, if there's going to be a bonus density criteria, what does that include? The current bonus density criteria is really geared to the high-rises, and we need those things. River walks, really important. But that doesn't really translate to Gardeners Park where there's no river. So we have to come up with a plan that has these amenities and open spaces in parks, because that's what drives people. They want to come here and they want to play. We need more soccer fields. What's the long-term plan for City of Palms Park? And it's great that the college is playing there, but what's the long-term plan for that? Could it be an international soccer stadium? Possibly, but I think that should be included.
You mentioned something about the stormwater ponds, which is somewhat near and dear to my heart, because one of the first things I did when I moved in a former life, in professional practice in Boston, when I moved back to Florida, we were asked to help a community that had 72 acres of stormwater ponds in their midst in East Tampa. And this request didn't come from the city, it came from the residents. They came to us and said, help us, please. We have all these ponds, and they have the chain link fences. In the fall and the winter, when the wind blows, the fences catch all the trash. The city doesn't come and clean it out. It's an eyesore, and it's certainly not doing anything to help property values. So one of the things that we did, and again, this was this has been done in a lot of other places. It's just that the city had not done anything like this before, and it was an uphill battle dealing with the Stormwater Department and Parks Department. But we renovated three ponds. Well, actually, it was we designed 3, but we've got 2 built. Turned those ponds into stormwater parks, okay? And the day, the last one that opened, I went out there about a week after it was opened, and I saw residents walking around the footpath that we defined. It was a quarter mile all the way around the pond. People were out there getting their exercise first thing in the morning. We designed a little park structure, belvedere, lookout over this pond. So I went up and sat on the top of this belvedere, and lo and behold, there was a Bible there, which told me that this park structure was being used, okay, by the community in ways that I certainly would never imagined, okay. But that's one of the things we're definitely going to look at, because those are resources, and they shouldn't be just isolated pieces of marginalized pieces of land, okay. So we look at conditions like that as having multiple purposes, or providing multiple functions, let's say. So, yes.
My name is Jan Greer, and I live in Ward 6, which I guess in terms from days gone by was like the North 40. I'm like way out there. It's but importantly, Ward 6 is contributing 46% of the city's revenues. And nobody in Ward 6, I don't think, minds being a donor ward. However, I do think an important piece of information that should always be considered in this redevelopment, is the economic impact to the city and the revenues that are needed. You know, it just doesn't come out of the sky.
That's right.
And there needs to be a balance. And the other thing I want to say is the last thing we need are pretty little houses with big green yards and a little white picket fence to dump more fertilizer and pesticides on to go into the river. There has to be a better answer to keep this environment the way it needs to be.
Okay, thank you. Well, like I said, we've heard that message from the city manager loud and clear about economic development. So we're definitely going to be addressing that.
Okay. Hey, my name's Britton Payami. I don't live in the area. I'm about 15 minutes away. But going back to the feel and identity, I think we just need to focus on, you know, who we're looking to get, residents versus visitors versus, you know, people in Lee County. And I really think there's a lot to gain by getting people here more than once or twice a year in this area. And I think that's something that can be started sooner than later, because people won't live here unless they visit here 5 or 6 times a year. And, you know, I'm not far from this area, and it takes, I mean, like I moved into the Buckingham area, and it took me about 6, 8 months to even realize I was 15 minutes from downtown, even though I work like a mile that way. So going back to the feel and identity, that's going to be a big one for that.
Good, thank you. Okay, we've got maybe about 15 more minutes, but we've still got two more topics I want to try to get your input on. So if you could make your comments brief on these last two. Number 5 talks about measures that are needed to minimize adverse impacts of new development. And it sort of goes back to what was brought up earlier about the rules or the regulations, let's say, that the city needs to incorporate in these regulatory documents to protect current residential and commercial properties, or for that matter, to protect the identity that was described earlier. Any comment? Yes.
I just wanted to mention in Gardner's Park that we have addressed a lot of what you're talking about today. One of those things that I just want to mention real quick is a lot of the people here are passionate about our history. I grew up in Fort Myers, and I renovated 3 structures downtown under the guise of I don't want to mess with our downtown history. but it's extremely expensive. The plan unit development is absolutely, I'm going to say, ridiculous. It is utterly ridiculous and so expensive and stifles small business growth. I feel like we have a branding issue in downtown. People often don't even know they're in the River District or where the River District is or where Gardner's Park is, for that matter. But one thing we did in Gardner's Park is we wanted to make sure some of those older structures were accessible to folks, and we wanted to monetize them. So what we did in our initial plan was making sure that it was a live-work situation where maybe an artist could live upstairs and have a shop downstairs and make those structures accessible, and so people don't come in and just tear them down and start from scratch. So that's something that we did want to work on. But the other thing I want to mention to you is that we do have a safety issue. Once you pass the River District's inner core, which is all lit up with security cameras everywhere, and you go into Gardner's Park, all of a sudden you feel like you're in a different realm. Midtown also, that danger is elevated. We're looking at lighting assessments there, but that it requires that a certain amount of our community agrees to the lighting, and they have some of that taken out in taxes over a 5-year period. And then the city will pay for, my understanding, is half of that. We're really, really eager over there to get some branding in place as far as signage for Gardner's Park. People don't even know Gardner's Park, by the way. And I'm all for Disneying downtown Fort Myers, by the way. The more Disney we get, the better. I feel like we are really missing out on some tech organizations that are in town. The 30-somethings are here. Those are contracted jobs. They don't want to live necessarily and buy a home. However, they are willing to rent at a higher rate. So I feel like in Gardner's Park, we've been stifled. A lot of our PUDs have been non-existent. In fact, Jerry here has got a PUD that's coming up, but he doesn't want to go through it until you guys figure out the density issue.
Okay. All right. Any other comments about adverse impacts?
Well, I just want to talk about mitigating adverse impacts, and that would be, you had mentioned the state's Complete Streets program that's becoming regulatory in January. Well, the City of Fort Myers Planning Department has a Complete Streets policy that was put together over the course of a year by a very large team of citizens and staff after reviewing the 25 of the top Complete Streets policies in the United States for the past 5 years, and an amalgamation of that produced a policy. One of the first things we could do was actually adopt that policy. We adopted a resolution that said we would become a Complete Streets city in 2011. This is 2017. So if we had such a policy, then anything that you develop or comes out of this, and any development that goes forward will have that imbued within it to mitigate adverse impacts.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So thank you for bringing that up. We are in the process of reevaluating the Complete Streets policies. We're actually going to update the transportation element, and we'll be including adopting new Complete Street policies as well. So we have undertaken that process. Correct.
Okay. Another comment?
I can't help this. I've heard a few people talk about the PUD process. I want to say on this side, we need the PUD process. I'm a part of the city's planning board, and maybe it may need to be streamlined or worked out a little bit. Maybe some things about it could be changed or critiqued. But the actual process itself about having to go through certain measures and checks and balances, if you put a plan together, you need to make sure that plan is being followed. The expertise and the people that's on that board are very good at what they do. And that check and balance system needs to remain in place. Because I'm telling you, some things that would have went through without the PUD process, giving it to an administrator to sign off on, I don't think that's the best thing to do. That's just Lee Ford talking.
Okay. All right. Okay. The last couple of minutes. Now, as I told you when I first started, I'm an urban designer. Okay. So I have to bring this issue up. The importance of good urban design. we've sort of talked about a lot of things that can contribute to good urban design. But I want to hear from everybody, places that you've been, places that you've experienced that, I don't know, have resonated with you for whatever reason because of the setting, the place, you know, the way the open spaces, the streets, the buildings, and everything sort of work together. That's in terms of good urban design. Give me some examples. Tell me. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we need more shade and canopies and continuous shade and canopies because we would all be wet right now if we were walking.
Okay.
Start with A.
Austin. Like you said, a lot of people moved after graduation. A lot of people moved out west. I'm from Iowa, and most of my class moved to California, Colorado, Seattle, because they had those draws. They had urban infrastructure. They had things for young people to do. I don't know why I decided to come down here, but I'm here now. I'm a landscape architect, by the way. Austin, Toronto, Waterfront Park.
Yes.
Actually, Buffalo, New York. They have a huge canal with a canal wall, but then they made docks and they made areas for kayaks to be able to pull up. They have a green area along the river. Like if we took out all these parking lots and made it all green space, there could be live music events, there could be food trucks, there could be all that kind of stuff to bring people down here. And you're asking what brings people down? It's culture. It's excitement that people want to come down here. I live 20 minutes away, and I'd rather, you know, get a beer down there than come all the way downtown for, you know, there's bars down here, there's restaurants, but what's exciting that's happening? And there's the music walk and the art walk, but also what is that doing? Like what kind of fulfillment is that giving you? How does that make you excited? There's also, let's see here, like Brooklyn Bridge Park. Just areas like that where the urban infrastructure was all, you know, they didn't have that green space, the soft space, the hardscape versus the softscape. If it's all hardscaping, then it's not a comfortable environment for people to want to be in and to stay in. Like I said, canopy, like having having those large live oaks here for people to rest under, to stay under. Also, what other? Let's see here. But like Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis, yes, and 16th Street in Denver, Colorado. Those are perfect examples of like how a corridor can bring a city together. So when looking into Midtown and looking into Palm Beach Boulevard, how can we create those into corridors that are worth coming through? And if you stop halfway through, you're not scared. It's not like a safety issue. You want to stop there because there are areas of interest throughout these vessels.
It's interesting, it's inviting, and it's welcome,
exactly.
and it's safe.
Exactly.
One place, Main Street, Santa Monica, has done an excellent job in creating bikeway corridors. They don't just paint one little white line and say, okay, this is where the bikes go. It's the white line, then a green space to show where the bikes go.
Buffered.
Then an orange space or a yellow space. I mean, cars are literally afraid of the bicyclists there, which is the way it should be because, you know, you can kill people on a bike.
Yeah. I was just there last month, so Third Street Promenade really works quite well. Yes.
Hey, I'm Alex Henderson. I'm a real estate agent here in town. One thing I want to mention is I see Midtown as being kind of the future epicenter of the city of Fort Myers. And I think a way to do that is to create something special for not only the residents that live there, but for outsiders, people that live in the outside of downtown, you know, even further out to like Colonial was mentioned earlier. There's a ton of residents out there. And I see it as, I'm sitting here looking at this map, and I see the city of Palms Park. It's such a great asset to be sitting there ready to be taken advantage of. And the stadium, and there's a ton of open land there. And why aren't we trying to put together a design to promote, have the city partner with a developer who can bring a huge project there, like a mixed-use recreational center with running tracks, swimming pools, soccer fields, stuff where people can buy into a membership or pay daily to come use, and around that have walkable, bikeable paths that kind of lead to it from green space to green space. And I just think that that's such an important thing. If you look around at all the recreational facilities around the country, or around the state of Florida, it's usually a pretty vibrant area. You have people there who are wanting to get fit and try to stay in shape, and I think that that is the key. I mean, it's there, it's ready to be utilized. Just got to figure it out.
Okay, thank you. We'll definitely we'll be looking at. From our initial just observation, it does seem like there's an awful lot of property down there that could be repurposed.
Hi,
Yes.
you were talking about cities. I would think also Bogota, Colombia, they did something really interesting. They had, you're probably very aware
yes.
of it. That was interesting. Also, I believe Prague has a, beautiful. They had to renew everything 27 years ago when they
On the
became
riverfront, right.
on the riverfront.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that would be interesting. They have food trucks. They have, farmers market just all along the river, and as well as Savannah, Georgia. Again, Andres Tuani was involved in that, but I think that's important. They tried that, to bring the riverfront back to the city. So
Okay.
those are two of the things.
Okay. Good. Good.
I was recently in Madrid, and there's a couple strategies I saw there that I thought were both unique and very effective. One is shading the streetscape.
Right.
As you've seen the stretched shade structures that go between the tertiary poche of the street.
Exactly.
And, it drops the temperature, which is,
Right.
Madrid's obviously a very hot city.
Yes.
It drops the temperature by 20 degrees easily.
Right.
And it makes it livable. In fact, when I came back, I took photographs of it and sent pictures to our mayor. Then we need to find some money. The other was the way they co-utilized the public realm. What is an intersection at from 8 to 5, by 7 o'clock is a concert venue, and they did that in ways that calmed traffic and made it more pedestrian friendly. It's just very simple planning techniques that make the city space far more shared and usable. A couple other examples that in terms of kind of redevelopment opportunities as Chattanooga,
Yes. Down on the riverfront.
Happy to say I got to work on that plan as well as the Market Square in Knoxville, downtown Knoxville, which took some blighted areas and really turned it into community impact. I mean, it had nothing to do with the ultimate development, but it had everything to do with developing the public realm.
Okay. Yes, I think there's a gentleman here.
Hi, Larry Strunk from One and Lure. One of the biggest things that we hear, this is a little bit off topic, but something really needs to be addressed, is that some of the people coming down to visit downtown Fort Myers or whatever, they're a little timid about crossing over from 75 to come downtown, going through Palm Beach Boulevard. And that may be something that we can put into the design or something maybe a little bit later. But I've talked to several clients, several people that have came in and said something about driving down Palm Beach Boulevard where they felt unsafe. And they asked me, well, is there other ways to get down here? I don't want to go that way anymore. The quickest way is right down Palm Beach. But maybe something we can address maybe later on to maybe utilize that area as well. I know they already have. They've updated that a little bit. However, they still get that feel, like we talked about earlier, about crossing over that, MLK. They still have that feeling coming downtown. They don't feel that safety on that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was going to suggest Providence, Rhode Island, just more comparable to
Yes.
the size and water quality issues they had enormous problems with, but they solved their river issues before they built, and I think that's something that we have to address as we move forward too.
Capitol Hill District, yep.
Just a couple ideas. One way to bring downtown and midtown together, I think, is thinking more year-round. I feel like people have always felt like, this is a seasonal community, but it's really not. I mean, we're here year-round. Having the trolley run year-round, having it run into midtown. So you can bring those two things together. Another thing that I think it would be really important in the park aspect is to bring in a dog park because everybody has a dog, and so they need to take them somewhere. Dog park, really, City Place has a dog park just right down the street. And something that's really important to us, you know, we renovated our building. We went into a 60-year-old building, we renovated it, it had good bones, and I think it turned out beautiful. We love it, we love being down in the city, and so I think we need to think about not just brand new infrastructure or brand new development, but also renovation, because renovation can keep some character. Sure. Ours is a mid-century
Yes.
modern building, can be character, not just in the way that you're thinking normally.
Well, you've got a lot more historic character than we do in Tampa, I have to admit.
And then one other thing that an idea that I love that I think could also be a nice way to bring in art, like Lydia talked about, is pop-up parks. You know, within the downtown, they're very interesting. They pop up for a short time. They can be art installations, and it brings people together to sit and, you know, they actually talk to each other and get to know each other.
That's a good point to end on. I think we're just about out of time. You mentioned pop-up parks, and I'm sorry. One more comment. Okay.
I'd just like to say one thing, nothing to do with the business reason why I'm here, but from a personal perspective, I live over the river over there in Cape Coral, over the water there, and there's about 170,000 people over there, and
Yep.
we come here. This is where I come when I show people around, my friends, my neighbors from England, my friends that are doctors. I bring them downtown. They didn't know about it, and we go downtown and we visit here. So to your point too, you have, the way you come in sometimes is a little, you know, a little weird when you go through. And I show people all the areas. I have my streets that I go down, and I show them all the historical houses. And I'm from Rhode Island, born and raised, and went through the whole Providence transition. So I understand that as well. But what they did in Providence too is they extended the streetscape out in some of the areas that people were wary about. So they've kind of embraced it. And I think what is happening here is right. And I wouldn't change a heck of a lot, to be honest. I like seeing the historical things. I like walking through, seeing the bands by Prime de Leon there on Friday nights and sitting and having a drink right there. So I think you're on to the right thing. And I've been here for 14 years, and when I came through town 14 years ago, a lot different than it is now. So I think you're on the right path.
Okay, good. I'm going to go back to your point about pop-up parks. We associate those with what we call tactical urbanism. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that term, but these young guys that will be working on this project with me are going to have all kinds of ideas, okay, along those lines. And I would ask that when we get into a workshop setting, they're going to be presenting all kinds of ideas that you might say, that's kind of weird. Well, think about where it's coming from. It's coming from another generation, okay, and they're thinking about the future, okay. As I mentioned before, we're going to be looking at all types of things that are going to address growth and evolution in downtown and in midtown in the future, but looking at it from a multi-generational point of view. So with that, I'm going to ask this is part of my team, to stand up, and I'll introduce them. We have several members of the team who couldn't make it, but Jeff Burton, who is a planning consultant on the team, is a CRA director. He had a budget meeting starting right about now that he wouldn't have been able to get back to. But we have Kim Middleton. She's a graduate student in the Master of Urban and Regional Planning program at USF. Louis Tilano is a graduate student in the Master of Architecture program at USF. Asa Escandrani is a recent graduate. She holds both an undergraduate degree in architecture and a master's degree in urban design, urban and community design. Zirak Nomani, same background, same credentials rather. She's currently a graduate student in urban and community design. Manitha Vakati is a recent graduate from the urban design program. Again, she is an architect in her home country of India, but has decided to stay here, work in the United States. Cal Santilli, who's also a graduate student in the architecture program as well. So there'll be a number of other students who will be involved in both the idea generation and the production effort along this way. So, we have Steve Cook, who's also on the faculty at USF. We have Terrence Sabia, who's the director of our research center, will also be involved. Some of these people will be coming on and off the team as the project sort of moves forward. And as I mentioned earlier, when we get to the point where we need to draw in people from our Center for Urban Transportation Research, we'll do that as well. Okay, thank you. And with that, I think we've exhausted our time.
Just want to remind everybody we have tons of cookies up here. Please, somebody take them or they're going to end up back at my office. There's still, I think, some coffee left, sodas, water. And please do leave any of your comment sheets. There's a comment box right there. Please place all your comment sheets in that box. We really want to hear from you and put together a report so that Trent and his group have everything.
One other thing before everybody leaves, I'm sorry I didn't bring a whole stack of business cards, but if you have a pencil, you can always get in contact with me, trentgreen@usf.edu.
Okay. All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you very much, Said.
I know, I understand that. Well, again, I want to thank you all. This was a lot of things to observe, and this is going to be a good team. And I was listening back there. It's a lot to learn, and it's a lot of work ahead of you. I appreciate you guys. This is yours. This is your project. Go at it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.